Welcome to Astoria Film Festival Presents, our weekly half-hour program featuring our films and filmmakers, events, and the local community. Today we're continuing our series on Queens nonprofits. The Queensboro Dance Festival showcases a multitude of small dance organizations from all over Queens in an annual festival that runs from May through October in various outdoor and indoor locations. The Chocolate Factory Theater is a home for local, national, and global experimental performance-based artists, providing them artistic experimentation through residencies. Promotional funding for Astoria Film Festival Presents Queens Nonprofits was provided by NYC&Company Foundation and the Queensborough President's Office of Cultural Affairs.
This year two into pandemic programming is, we're at least we're a little bit more prepared than last year. We have a little more time, but it's not, it's still not the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Though I was watching your social media feed over the year and you did that whole little thing where you went from like different parts of Queens and you did the arrows and I thought that was really well done. And
Oh, thank you.
I appreciated how you did that,
Thanks. Yeah, it was a challenge to feel and imagine what we usually do for audiences in person and when we're on site and when we're marketing on site also. And what we've found to reach the different residents of each neighborhood, it's like you really have got to do a very local grassroots approach. And so when we were kind of limited to online and social media, I was like, this is going to be not nearly the same impact. So I was trying to be imaginative into ways we can still capture this feeling that we're touring and that we're acknowledging different parts of Queens. So we really like fostering a lot of cross-cultural Queens exchange. We want to go to all the corners of Queens and find those dance companies that, perform anywhere from their local neighborhood community center to international stages that maybe some facets of the dance world have never heard of, because a big part of Queens is the traditional and cultural and folk dance world, which often does not naturally interact with the contemporary classic commercial dance world. So our festival is one of those unique platforms where they share the same stage and they get to see each other's work and experience each other's dance techniques and cultures, and it's just the best feeling for everybody. We're trying to break down a lot of different barriers, even just by being outside, wanting to be as publicly accessible and inviting as possible, because we definitely recognize, when you're performing in an institution or in a large theater, sometimes that automatically leaves a lot of people outside of the doors because they may feel that whatever's happening inside those doors is not for them, or maybe they can't afford it, or maybe they don't know how to experience it. So that's something we're also trying to break down as a barrier to access, in addition to ageism and competitiveness. That's a big thing in the dance world, or at least on the classical, commercial, contemporary side even, and trying to be as inclusive as we can. To date, cumulatively, we've presented about 120 different Queens-based dance companies, and every year we get about 50% that come and join us again, and then another 50% that are new to us. So that's really exciting, and we keep growing in that way. It's been everything. I mean, we've had several regions of Indian dance represented. We've had Chinese dance represented, international and Latin ballroom, all different types of modern dance, ballet, hip hop, West African, jazz, Mayan, Mexican, different regions of Mexico, flamenco. I mean, we've had aerialists, Japanese traditional dance, uh, Tibetan dance, Greek dance, um, just so many, Hawaiian, we've had Hawaiian. Um, but there's just been so many lovely and beautiful dance cultures that have joined us, and it's just really such an honor to be able to present them and to learn about each dance company's story, especially particular to Queens, because a lot of our dancers are also immigrants to Queens and to New York, and are coming here because they want to be a dancer in New York. So even that aspect of their story is just really amazing. This festival has given me a different facet of purpose as a dancer. I'm still holding on to my dance hat, doing freelance projects and doing my own work when I can. But this festival has given it a deeper purpose for me here, not just as an arts producer, but also as a dance advocate for the artists here in this borough. You know, we hear and we see a lot of the needs and the inequities in the dance field. I have, you know, been trying to think of ways to approach, you know, city advocacy as, can we consider dance workers, dance companies, and dance spaces as small business? And so can those be then treated and funded and protected equally? And listen, I understand that there is a health crisis, and there is an economic crisis, and there is a social justice crisis. You know, these are very serious things, but there needs to be a little bit more attention paid to the economic contribution and stimulation that the arts field here in New York City provides to strengthen the economy here. It's not to be underestimated or undervalued. I mean, Broadway is definitely a bigger example of that, but as the city, you know, in the same way that the city recognizes the importance and the power of small business and family-owned business, it's the same thing in the dance field. You know, dance and performance is not just Broadway. It is also those small local dance companies and groups that are doing very serious, impactful work for decades at a time, but that are not getting the same recognition.
So what's coming up next for Queensboro Dance Festival?
So we're working on season 8. We're going on as scheduled. We kick off May 15th. And we're going to go through October 3rd. We're going to start with a virtual tour, again on Instagram and on our social media channels. And then we're going to go into a small series of on-site performances throughout Queens. We're working with parks, we're working with DOT, we're being very diligent and prepared for anything that might happen. So, you know, because we're essentially in the same spot as we are last year. It's just as dangerous. It's just as, we have to remain just as diligent. So, you know, so it's all there. We're prepared. We're ready to go. We're amping up our digital production side. That's a new thing for us now, is learning how to be like somewhat of a strange hybrid of a TV producer. You know, working more with you know, types of different video files and learning different types of editing now that we haven't really had to do before for live performance. But that's our plan. We're feeling good about it. And our main platform is Instagram. So people can also follow us and keep in touch with all of those announcements and events. We are at Queensboro Dance Festival.
We started out making work together, and we were, like many arts groups and artists, you know, we were transient producers. And because of the nature of the work we were doing and using more and more technology, being transient became more and more difficult and more expensive. So back 25 years ago, we decided let's let's cost it out to see what it would be like to have our own space, as opposed to renting by the hour, lugging things, getting parking tickets, and the cabling. As you know, you're in film. You rent a space for 4 hours, half of it is just cabling. And it just worked out. The cost benefit analysis showed it would actually be more cost efficient for us to have a space. And so that goes way back, and we couldn't find anything. We lived in Long Island City. We couldn't find anything that we could afford, because back then, a lot of visual artists, and still are, thank goodness, but there wasn't really space for performing arts, or that welcomed performing arts at that time. I'm being honest. So it took a while before, and 3 spaces before we had the space we're in now. And then that leads into, and I'll let Brian take over, how it went from us being transient producers to us being presenting partners.
Brian.
I mean, yeah, when we first opened the current chocolate factory space in Long Island City, the idea, as I held it anyway, was that it was really mainly just a space for us to make our own work in. I hadn't given much thought to how our space or our resources, small as they were, might serve or benefit other artists. Ultimately, I think we saw an opportunity to build the community around the place if we were willing to share the space with other artists. We took a lease on the current space, and when we made an agreement for another artist to come in the very early years, we would just share the box office with them, but never asked for money directly from them. And then as we grew, it got much larger, to the point where now, we're commissioning this work.
We recognize that artists are undersupported, and so we do not only do we pay commissioning, but we also put every artist, like if you were to come in with your team, you and your team are put on our payroll for $15 an hour as an employee.
Wow.
While you're working in our space.
Oh, that's amazing.
And we instituted that with the help of one of our biggest funders, Lambent Foundation, a couple of years ago. And it changed, the amounts changed and grew. And because so many small groups, and we were in this position too, you're in these partnerships where you're signing an agreement where you say, I'm abiding by all labor rules. I have all the right insurance, and you can't afford it. So by putting them all on our payroll hourly, they're all covered by workers' comp, disability, unemployment insurance, and their company is also covered by our general liability insurance and stuff. And it really validates the labor of the artist, which should be validated.
I mean, we've presented, I guess at this point, a few hundred different artists over the last 15 years. There are artists that we have developed sort of long-standing relationships with. So there are artists who have come back to work with us 2 or 3 or 4 times, but there's also a lot of artists that we work with just a single time. It's been a strange year in pandemic, so we commissioned a bunch of artists for the current season without really knowing what would or could happen. So we've had a handful of artists in the space in the last 6 months, just doing residencies, and a few projects became sort of film shoots. So we've actually, there 2 films have been made or have been shot in our space in the last 6 months. A theater artist that we've worked with once before, named Sybil Kempson, we had made an agreement to co-commission her work with Abrons Art Center on Lower East Side. I don't know if you know the Abrons.
Yes.
We've worked with them a lot over the years, and it would have been a show. But as she was working on it in these pandemic months, she sort of realized that it would make a really great radio play. So they sort of produced, and it's available now. It was released in January, late January, and it's available through May. and it's about 4 hour. It's a 4 episode, about 4 hour long.
Where is it available?
Radio play. You can you can just purchase a ticket on it's actually a sliding scale ticket you can purchase from our website. So if you go to chocolateFactoryTheater.org, right on the homepage, there's a link to purchase it. Currently, there are two emerging artists in our space, named Millie Cap and Matt Shalsey, who are doing just a kind of developmental residency on a new piece that they're making. And there have been a few others before that, but they are very much representative of the community that we've been deeply a part of and supporting for 15 years. This sort of what people used to call the downtown scene, the experimental dance and performance scene.
One of the things we had done also in the past, like 5 or 6 years. When did we start doing we do professional, we professionally tape
archive?
Every show.
Yeah, it's 6 years old at this point, I think. Yeah, at a certain point we started making really high quality, just multi-camera video documents of all of our performances and putting them online. And we just put them up there for free, and we don't even really we've never really even put much effort into marketing them. And they have it's always a bit surprising to me how many people are watching them. It's a lot of people relative to the number of people who would show up, could show up to see a show
in other
live.
parts of the world.
The thing that I think I'm seeing happen, it's sort of early even still to understand, but the thing that I think is happening is that there's been that discussion of, okay, so the thing I wanted to make was a live dance performance. So that we're not going to be able to do that. So what will we do? I think that there's been the discussion around, should I make a dance film? And in our experience anyway, the artists have sort of unanimously sort of said, no, we don't want to do that. We need to make an entirely different thing, because we don't make dance. We're not dance film artists. We're live performance artists. So we need to just find an entirely different way to express this work.
Pre-COVID, all of the documentation was done with great care. The videographer we work with has been working in the dance community and performance community for decades, and spend a lot of time with the artists first to kind of know what their goals are. But then it's not about creating a dance film. It's really about trying to create as much as you can a close proximity to the performance filmed, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And that was pre-COVID. So the artists, and he was there like every night, like there was different, so it wasn't about them doing it for the camera. And then now in the pandemic, and actually a lot of universities will look at this as documentation as well. Like they'll whereas now, as Brian was talking about in the pandemic, a lot of artists are they're just making something else. They are creative beings, they're artists, and they can't really do live performance dance, but they're not saying, I'm going to make a dance film, but it's something, whether it's a radio play, well, she's mostly theater artist, but or film, but not necessarily a dance film.
So the cameras become the audience.
What do you think, Brian? Or a collaborator?
In a very different way than previous.
Yeah, the camera becomes a performer, maybe. I don't know if they become the audience. They definitely play a role. I don't know. The real question is who the audience is in any of this stuff at this point. But the camera plays a much more important role. It's not passive.
What are you guys working on next? I know you have a new property you're managing, I think, and
we do. Yeah, we have a new building that we own, and we are actually spending quite a bit of time now. We just finished the planning for renovations, and that took a couple of years. And now we are about to launch the capital campaign. We have raised public money, but we have to raise a bunch of private money. And a mutual supporter of ours, of Astoria Film Festival and Chocolate Factory, Tracy Commune, is one of the co-chairs of that capital fundraising committee. She's really a champion of the arts, as is Kaufman Astoria. I have to give it to them.
No, they've been nothing but great to us, really.
And that
And
wasn't thrown out there as a plug or a commercial. It's just the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree.
But so we're, launching that. And so that takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy. We're expanding our board. We're growing, our staff is growing. And that's on the more on the operations side and planning for the future. But there's a lot of programming happening even in the new building. Even though we can't have audience, it's there, we have it, and artists need space to work. I mean, that is one of the things that we're all talking about, is the sharing of stuff virtually. But that, even with this virtual world through which we can share and make things more accessible to everyone, people still need space to make things. And so we're glad that we're creating something that's going to outlive us, that will be here for artists to continue to make work.
David,
Yeah.
when did you first realize you were white?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Hello, America.
This piece feels like always an evolving process in a way.
It kind of grew out into like a larger conversation about how people have conversations about race in the world, and our attempt sprung from this understanding that people are afraid to attempt the conversation because they're afraid of being wrong, which we all will be.
Exactly.
And recognizing the need for a conversation.
You know how at the root of everything we don't say to each other is slavery?
Yeah.
And actually committing to it. And so from there, we began looking at different source material, trying to see what could stand as some sort of skeleton for a form in which we could work.
And so one of the things that Marcella brought in was an interview on Charlie Rose. He was interviewing Octavia Butler. And it became quite clear how much he was dominating the conversation and pretending to know what he was talking about in ways, or even about her own writing, that it didn't seem like he was familiar with it. And the whole nature of the conversation about race centering on the white experience seems like perfect.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there are 4 dimensions, right?
Right?
So what would be the 5th or the 6th?
Well, a dimension is
What
really
would
just...
it look like or feel like?
Well, a dimension would look
I
like...
guess I'm trying to understand what a dimension is, right? I mean, I can understand space and I can understand time, but I don't understand what's likely to be next.
That's right. And one of the things that makes it really hard to think about extra dimensions is that we can't picture them.
I found a website that did one of those scales of experiences and phenomenology, and it went way up into the size of the universe and way down into microscopic and then quantum scale. And it reached a point where it said distances smaller than this are not confirmed, and I thought that was kind of a funny idea. That it's very centered on on our senses. So I think we were both looking for something that allowed a level of awkwardness or the feeling of discomfort, and then the effort of working through that. We started working, just you and I together, for a while before others came in, and then Tae and Hyung-suk came in, because we knew we wanted to play with those elements from early on.
Our work with Hyung-suk emerged from this desire to think about scale in the conversation, and his ability with a camera to zoom into the very micro, and then you have this large image that he projects onto the screen, and somehow juxtaposing those images with conversations about the universe and what images he's able to create out of very micro things that look like the universe.
One that I never expected, and that was my perception of gravity.
Yeah, so our collaborators were key to bringing this piece to life. So we had Hyung-suk John, Tae Blow, who does the sound, Julius Powell, who's an additional performer and also collaborator. Who else? Chris Green, who did the set and the objects on stage. Grace Gilmore designed the lights.
And we were lucky enough to work with a wonderful artist and scholar by the name of Melanie George. She was our dramaturg. And Montana Blanco, our costume designer. We also worked on some musical things with Stu.
Janet Clancy, production manager. Boo Frable, our producer.
And Amanda
Brandis, our administrative director. And then the folks here at Abrams.
The idea of the bounce acting as a projection surface came from this idea that everything in the space could in some way function on a TV set. And also this other area that we're imagining of outer space, a space station.
America Houston standing by.
And then also to, be useful as a theatrical object.
Working with the idea of this large circular table as sort of the like the geography of where the conversation largely takes place, mirrored in a large circular screen.
Pointing at